know an app is big when it changes the norms of language. Facebook made friend a verb and gave us a new understanding of the word like. Tinder has endowed the swipe with new meaning. Swiping right on someone is good. Swiping left, not so much. Tinder plays a starring role in the brave new world and age-old story of looking for love. And other things. 1 million New Yorkers use Tinder. That's 1 in 8 people. Look around, folks. But Tinder's founder and president, Sean Rad, says the app is only accomplishing a small fraction of what it can do. He wants Tinder to be responsible for every introduction, every match made in friendship, business, and, of course, heaven. But can Tinder become more than just a hookup app? Sean Rad is here to talk about that with Atlantic editor-in-chief James Bennet.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Sean, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. What an introduction.
It's quite an introduction, thank you. You launched less than 3 years ago, September 2012, and now there's 1.6 billion swipes a day, 1.6 billion times, some tens of millions of profiles get viewed, and people decide either to discard them or to pursue them. The engagement metrics are kind of off the charts. Yep. People spend 12 minutes a day, the typical user, right, on Tinder, I guess in multiple sessions. It wasn't exactly uncrowded space when you moved into this area 3 years ago. There are plenty of other dating apps out there, so I thought we might start. I'd love to hear you just on what the opening was that you saw. You told Forbes something last fall. We're accustomed now to audacious statements from technologists, but you said, as you put it, we've eliminated the fear of rejection, which to me sounds like saying we cured the common cold. How do you do that?
So I look at us as doing something different or solving a different problem than what some of the other dating apps were. There's no shortage of ways to meet people or to sort of see people that you would like to meet, rather. What Tinder solves is when there's somebody that you do want to get to know, it's daunting to have to walk up to them and you feel like you're about to get rejected and it might not be the right time. There might be a group of friends sitting at a table and I'm not just going to interject and say hello. And if we can find a way to facilitate introductions, we could bring the world a little closer together. And that was sort of the initial thought about Tinder. It wasn't necessarily building a dating app or solving dating. It was about how do we break down the social barriers that prevent me from walking up to somebody and saying hello or meeting people that I should know in my city. And that's how Tinder started. And in that way, we're removing the rejection in the sense that if I see somebody that I want to get to know, I can anonymously swipe right. I don't have to put myself out there and feel like I'm about to get rejected or be the initiator. And if that signal is reciprocated, then Tinder sort of does the match.
And if it's not reciprocated, you don't feel as bad?
You don't feel as bad. It's kind of like looking at somebody across the room, and if they don't look at you back or they don't feel that connection, then no harm done. But if they look at you back and you have that moment, then you've both opted into each other. There's a very real, organic nature to what we are doing.
You mentioned before we came out that you're seeing the fastest growth right now internationally, and I'm wondering, the basic formula that you've applied here in the U.S., are you encountering cultural resistance anywhere to it elsewhere in the world?
No, it's actually amazing that we're kind of waiting for that to happen. But you see similar patterns in every market, and I think it's kind of a testament to the universal nature of Tinder. I think everyone wants to meet new people. It's a part of life, and it's how we sort of explore the world and how we expand as human beings. And the barriers that we have, that sense of rejection, the timing, the context, is a universal problem. Doesn't matter where you are, those sort of human prohibitors exist.
Well, so let's drill down a little bit into the detail of this and kind of what you've learned about human nature from what is really kind of a vast social experiment that you're engaged in. What actually works? I mean, what do you see that people respond to? What kind of pictures, what kind of profiles?
Yeah, it's we have more data than we can possibly mine through.
Yeah.
I think that's actually one of our challenges, that we're trying to comprehend the vast data that we have. But I think anecdotally, I would say what I've seen is success on Tinder comes from sort of being yourself. I think there's this idea that if I have a cool pickup line, like I will have more success on Tinder. But the reality is, it doesn't work in real life, and it doesn't work on Tinder. But if there's something in the photo that I comment on something that I see in somebody's photo, or I sort of make a connection that way, then it's kind of the most effective way of approaching it. And on my profile, I think people, it's remarkable how like intuitive we are when we look at photos. We're trained to really analyze these photos and understand them on a very deep level. So I think people can sense that fakeness. And the more you're yourself, and the more that you just display who you either are or aspirationally want to be, I think those nuances are picked up.
So holding a puppy or not holding a puppy, or smiling or not smiling, or
I mean, anything, yeah. If you like puppies, hold a puppy. Yeah.
Between the sexes, do you see men performing very differently on Tinder than women? Do you see men initiating most of the contacts, or women initiating more of them?
Well, I think culturally, most cultures, men are the initiators, or the instigators of. It's just a cultural norm. I think Tinder is leveling the playing field a little bit, because it'll first. At the forefront, it sort of puts control back into everyone's hands. You don't have to talk to somebody if you don't want to. Versus in life and on social networks, as a guy or woman, I can be bombarded by people that I might not want to talk to. So the opposite end of rejection is true. It doesn't feel good to get rejected, but it also doesn't feel good to have to reject people. That is another form of rejection. But Tinder sort of eliminates that, and I think in a way it's empowering to men, to women. And I think particularly to women is usually the party that's pursued by men, and now they can sort of be like, hey, like let me curate my own experience, and let me take control of my experience.
I read somewhere that the men tend to swipe right 46, almost half the time, and women it's more like 14% of the time.
I don't know if that's the exact, but yeah, it's women swipe right substantially lower. At least in Tinder, they're far more they're far more picky or sophisticated when it comes to sort of picking who they want, who they like. Men are a lot more liberal with their likes.
So let's stay with the question of women on Tinder. It's been one of the criticisms that women can encounter some pretty aggressive and even nasty behavior. There was a tough piece in The Guardian just in April that said it's also emerged, Tinder has emerged as a place where women regularly have to put up with a kind of sexist, vulgar, and aggressive messages that, if said in real life, would see you instantly shunned as a pervert. Just talk a little bit about how you think about policing the environment in Tinder or if you do,
right,
to prevent that kind of thing from happening.
First of all, I think Tinder's completely a reflection of society. I don't think there's an alternative reality called Tinder, and I act there, I act a certain way there, and I act a certain way in real life. I think it's very representative of who's there, and Tinder's the size of a massive country. And you're of course going to find incidences of creepiness, just like when you walk into a bar, there are going to be guys that are lost and don't know how to communicate well or effectively. But I actually think Tinder's a safer environment, because unlike at the bar, yes, there are social pressures, but there are social pressures on Tinder, and there's also moderation. If a woman feels uncomfortable, they can report somebody, and we do a lot to listen to those signals, and if there's somebody who's misbehaving, we quickly take action. And something that we actually just launched in the last couple months that people don't really know about because it's kind of behind the scenes. Actually, the less people that know about it, the better. But we have this, we call it corrective behavior experience. So if you do something wrong, whether it's a guy or we won't just shut down your account. We will educate you on what you've done wrong. And we will almost give you a chance to correct. And if it happens again, the second strike, we give you a little harsher warning. And by the third or fourth, you might get your account might get deleted. So I think we didn't feel that it was our place to just sort of kick people off the platform, but we wanted to sort of give them more context and give them an opportunity to correct. Because I think a lot of the times what you see is men don't know what to do. So it's not that they're inherently creepy or bad. They just genuinely don't know what to say. So they resort to stupid things. That's unfortunate reality, but
it's been my experience.
Yeah. So, and I think that corrects over time, and I think they're learning. And the more practice you have on Tinder, the more you realize, being rude or offensive doesn't work. Mm-hmm. And when you realize it doesn't work, you stop being rude and offensive. So I think Tinder, there's like this self-policing aspect of Tinder.
Do you see yourself then over time as moving past enabling the meeting and actually kind of improving etiquette and helping people get better at this?
I think practice makes perfect. So I think in the real pre-Tinder, in a pre-Tinder world, I don't really have that many opportunities to meet somebody. Meaning, I see a lot of people as I walk my daily life. There's people I want to meet, but there's a lot of misconnections. Post-Tinder, I have all this optionality and all these relationships that I'm forming, and I can learn through those experiences what proper etiquette is. So I think, again, going back to, some of, there's this persona of the somebody who's just out there for hookups, who's creepy and sending. The most successful people that I've met in relationships are actually some of the sweetest, because they know that being rude does not work. And I think it's actually inexperience when it comes to sort of social connections and introductions that leads to bad behavior.
Talk about the hookup piece of it for a second, because that was actually, we did a story on The Atlantic in Tinder's early days saying that it was the headline of the piece was Tinder, a hookup app that women actually want to use. So at least embrace the idea that women were more comfortable on the platform. But how do you feel about the name Hookup app?
I hate it. I think it's problematic in a lot of ways. Number one, all we're doing is connecting people. What they decide to do with that connection is completely up to them. We have users. Every day we get thousands of emails of marriages, of relationships, of friendships that are formed. It's completely up to people what they want to do with these relationships. We even have users as they travel around the world. They'll match with people and get local recommendations on what to do. There's a concept internally we have called hacking Tinder, which is on your bio. You sort of write, you say that you're here for a particular reason that might not be a romantic one or something. So I just think it's very limiting to say hookup, number one. Number two, if that is what we are, then again, it's a reflection of society. I mean, we have so many users, a substantial portion of the single population of the world is on Tinder. So if what Tinder is a hookup app, then I think we got to start looking within and asking ourselves, is society a certain way, or is it Tinder? Is Tinder a reflection of society? And are they making Tinder what it is? Or are users making Tinder what it is? Or are we transforming users into being something they're not?
Well, this is why all of us would love you to mine your data and tell us what you're learning about who we are. Do you know anything about relationships formed on Tinder? How many have turned into committed relationships or marriages? Do you keep that kind of
No, it's hard
numbers?
to tell. I think, anecdotally, we get so much, so many emails, success stories every day. I've been invited to more weddings than I can ever possibly attend in multiple lifetimes. So I think, we know it's working. I think if it wasn't working, we wouldn't be growing this fast. Sure, Tinder's fun, but at the end of the day, there's life-changing value that Tinder's bringing to people's lives, and I think people don't. I don't know if people know this, but we've had 6 billion matches happen on Tinder. That's 6 billion connections that would have never have existed were not for Tinder. Frankly, I don't care if it's hookups, romance, whatever. It's not up to us. Our users are using Tinder the way they want, but 6 billion connections is amazing.
Well, let me ask you then to address another criticism,
Yep.
which is that Tinder's also breaking relationships up. That there was this Global Web Index study this spring that said, based on a survey of internet users, that 42%, I think, was the number of Tinder users
That's
are
so stupid.
already in a relationship. I'm just telling you what I read.
Yeah, it was
And 30% are married.
that study was a sham. I think people are eager to sort of integrate themselves into the Tinder narrative for their own gain. I think that there was. The study was a shame. I think, again, I go back to say, hey, if 42% of people on Tinder are single, then the world is screwed. Or I think we should reconsider the institution of marriage if that's the case, because we have so many users. No, I don't think, we actually have the data, and it's remarkably a low percentage of people that are in a relationship, and a lot of the times that's actually because they miscategorize their Facebook. They forget to say that they're out of a relationship, or they just got out of one, but they don't want to hurt their former partner by changing it. I think that study was ridiculous.
Just listening to you talk, I'd like to just ask you a little bit about you, if you don't mind. I mean, you're. This is the third company you founded.
Yep.
And obviously it's a wild success and growing by leaps and bounds. You've already had dramatic ups and downs that most people might expect to have over the course of an entire career. You had to, you had a battle among the group of the founders of Tinder, and you moved out of the CEO role last fall into president. And you're all of 28 years old, I think, right?
29 on Friday.
29 on Friday. Well,
Yeah.
happy birthday.
Thank you.
What do you want to do with your life?
I think I'm doing it. I love what we're doing. It's the most rewarding thing to sort of wake up every day and know that you're having a positive impact on the world. I think, people come to me and they tell me like, oh my gosh, how does it feel to be worth so much money and yada yada yada. I really don't give a shit. Like I think I always tell them, I say, give me $100 billion and it probably won't feel as good as walking around and having people walk up to you and say you changed their lives. That I think is like the most amazing feeling ever. And I'm doing what I want to do.
So then what is your long-term vision for how Tinder will ultimately be integrated into people's lives? I mean, is it steady state, this formula that's working and will continue to expand globally, or you talk about it as a social network, so what kind of social life, what sort of functionality do you envision the app providing over time?
Our work is not done. We're just getting started. I think even if you go back to sort of like the initial vision we had for Tinder, we're not even close to that from a product standpoint, yet alone audience. So I think there's definitely growing the audience, and there's perfecting the current experience and making sure that everyone can leverage it. I'd put that in the optimization bucket, and then you have the sort of bucket of innovation, which is sort of things that we are building that we think can drastically advance this mission of connecting people and making sure that everyone who should meet will actually meet. And I think you'll see some interesting changes to Tinder over the coming years, and we're just going to keep iterating, and we're going to keep pushing forward.
Do you see yourself as ultimately just decreasing the amount of loneliness in the world? I mean, what's the most?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, 6 billion. It's funny because social media is remarkable in giving us, I think, a false sense of a false cure to loneliness. Meaning, I feel great when people like my photos, but nothing really replaces human connection. And Tinder is a scalable platform that connects people and actually results in real human connection. Not a like, not a comment that is passive and about broadcast, but one-on-one real connections. And I think that's awesome. And the more of those we can have in the world, the better. So I think I think it's just a great use of our devices and technology. Bring us closer together.
Well, that's where we need to leave it, and it's a great place to
Thank
leave
you.
it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.